Long before superhero universes and algorithm-driven streaming platforms dominated entertainment, the 1980s stood as a chaotic playground for comedy, a time when studios freely approved projects that were strange, risky, and unapologetically absurd. Beneath the era's massive hits existed a hidden tier of comedies that were daring, eccentric, and creatively fearless. Films so odd and inventive that most audiences barely remember them today. This countdown revisits 10 forgotten 80s comedies that vanished from pop culture memory but absolutely deserve renewed attention, especially since the final entry is so outrageous it likely couldn't exist in the modern era. Is Modern Girls from 1986, a film that opens exactly how every legendary 80s night seemed to begin, with reckless choices, clouds of hairspray, and a Duran Duran tape permanently jammed in the car stereo. The story centers on three roommates, Margot, Kelly, and Cece, sharing a cramped Los Angeles apartment that looks like fashion chaos frozen in time. They have no savings, no plans, and no sense of direction, only a craving for one unforgettable night. Their goal is simple: hit the clubs, dance until sunrise, and ignore reality for a few hours. Naturally, everything immediately goes wrong. Kelly accidentally drives off in her boss's car while attempting to collect her paycheck. Cece, a radio DJ, abandons her show mid-shift to pursue a pop star obsession. Margot, the reserved one, is unwillingly dragged along, her lipstick smeared and patience thin, questioning why every outing turns into disaster. Their night begins at the Rhythm Room, a glowing neon maze filled with fog machines, sequins, and wildly questionable dance moves, as a synth-heavy remix of Obsession blares over a crowd soaked in sweat and spandex. In classic 80s style, Margot's date disappears in favor of a British new wave musician who looks like he stepped straight out of MTV. From there, the evening unravels completely. The trio wander into a suspicious Hollywood after-party where no one seems to know who owns the house. Cece is mistaken for a pop icon, pushed on stage, and forced to perform for a massive crowd. Kelly attempts to flee with a stolen car but gets caught at a police checkpoint, leaving Margot once again to clean up the mess. When the sun finally rises, the three friends stand on a downtown LA rooftop, eyeliner smudged, wallets empty, and spirits intact. The night wasn't perfect, but they survived it together. The film radiates pure 1980s energy through its vibrant visuals, fast pacing, and lingering sense that youth fades too quickly. Beneath the glitter lies a sincere story about female friendship. Imperfect, loyal, chaotic, and genuine. Virginia Madsen, Cynthia Gibb, and Daphne Zuniga bring warmth and authenticity, playing off one another like real friends trying to navigate a confusing world. The movie feels like a time capsule from an era when a single reckless night could feel endless. Is The Couch Trip from 1988, a premise that asks one insane question: what happens when a psychiatric patient becomes a nationally adored radiotherapist? Dan Aykroyd stars as John Burns, a clever con artist confined to an Illinois mental institution, restless and dangerously intelligent. After hacking into the hospital's laughably fake 80s computer system, Burns discovers that celebrity radio psychiatrist Dr. Doc Baird is taking time off, and producers are desperate for a substitute. One convincing phone call later, Burns is impersonating Baird, charming the staff, boarding a flight to Los Angeles, and stepping straight from an asylum into instant fame. Once on air, no one questions him. He sounds confident, speaks quickly, and carries enough charisma to sell anything. Callers flood the station with stories of broken marriages, identity crises, and emotional collapse. Burns offers no real therapy, only ruthless honesty. The audience loves it. Ratings skyrocket. Overnight, an escaped mental patient becomes the most influential voice in self-help radio. But chaos follows success. The real Dr. Baird watches his career crumble live on television and hunts for the truth, while a manipulative producer, played by Walter Matthau, happily profits from the madness. By the final act, everything erupts. Therapy conventions devolve into riots. Burns crashes broadcasts in religious costumes, and crowds trail him through Sunset Boulevard like a spiritual prophet. Behind the camera, production was just as disorderly. Test audiences rejected early cuts. Studios worried the humor was too strange, and Aykroyd's relentless improvisation overwhelmed editors. Director Michael Ritchie later described it as the strangest comedy he ever made. Despite its chaos, the film captures a sharp truth about how easily confidence is mistaken for intelligence and how fame can transform instability into branding. It's messy, excessive, and unmistakably 80s. A reminder that some forgotten comedies weren't failures, just too strange for their time. That legacy continues with Just One of the Guys from 1985, a film that quietly influenced generations of modern comedies. Long before later gender swap stories, this high school satire followed Terry Griffith, portrayed by Joyce Heiser, a talented student journalist dismissed for not sounding masculine enough. In response, she disguises herself as a boy and transfers schools to prove her ability. What begins as rebellion spirals into chaos as Terry struggles to maintain her cover while forming real friendships and falling for a boy who doesn't know her secret. The film builds to an unforgettable prom night reveal that shocked audiences and defined bold 80s humor. Though overshadowed by larger teen hits from John Hughes, it remains one of the era's most daring comedies, using absurdity to make a genuine statement. That brings us to Fletch Lives, the sequel that unleashed full Southern fried chaos. Chevy Chase returns as Irwin M. Fletcher, inheriting a decaying Louisiana plantation only to uncover murder, corruption, and televangelist greed. Disguises pile up, improve dominates scenes, and the film shifts wildly between mystery and cartoonist satire. Critics were divided, but audiences came for Chase's relentless sarcasm, and that's exactly what they got. Sits Moving, a frantic portrayal of middle-class frustration starring Richard Pryor as Arlo Pear, a man whose career promotion triggers total collapse. Every step of relocating goes wrong, from criminal movers to deranged neighbors, transforming a simple move into a psychological unraveling. Supported by Dana Carey and Randy Quaid, the film balances slapstick chaos with emotional truth, capturing how quickly stability can disintegrate. And with that destruction complete, the countdown prepares to introduce the next film. A story that doesn't just depict chaos but actively engineers it, throwing unsuspecting hustlers into Cold War madness with consequences they never see coming. The Experts, 1989. Years before John Travolta revived his career with Pulp Fiction, he appeared in one of the most offbeat comedies of the 1980s, The Experts. It's the kind of movie that feels like someone blended the concept of The Truman Show with Red Dawn and somehow turned the result into a comedy. The premise is peak Cold War madness. Hidden somewhere inside the Soviet Union, officials construct an artificial American town designed to train spies for life in the United States. The problem is their understanding of America froze sometime around the late 1950s. Into this bizarre experiment step Travis and Wendell, two clueless New York nightclub promoters portrayed by Travolta and Ari Gross. Hoping to make their fake town feel authentic, the KGB abducts the pair and secretly transports them overseas, convincing them they've been hired to launch a nightclub in Nebraska. What follows is non-stop fish-out-of-water chaos. The two outsiders begin schooling the townspeople on what real America looks like, from new wave dancing to flirting techniques and terrible coffee habits, all while unaware that their students are actually Russian agents pretending to be Americans. The result is a comedic hall of mirrors where everyone is deceiving everyone else, and that's exactly why it works. One standout moment features Travolta teaching a group of Soviet spies how to act cool, blasting Duran Duran from a cassette player, swaggering across the room, and shouting about American confidence. Another memorable scene has him debating a Soviet general over whether Budweiser qualifies as refined American food. The humor is absurd, clever, and oddly endearing. Off-screen, however, the film struggled. Studio executives had no clue how to sell it, and even the promotional poster seemed unsure of what movie it was advertising, depicting Travolta with a martini in one hand and a globe in the other. Viewed today, the film feels oddly ahead of its time, poking fun at manufactured reality, stereotypes, and propaganda years before those topics became mainstream. Although it failed commercially, the movie proved important for Travolta personally, as it's where he met Kelly Preston, his future wife, who plays the Soviet instructor who gradually falls for him. Brain Donors, 1989. If pure chaos could be bottled into human form, it would resemble Brain Donors. This overlooked late 80s comedy, meant as a modern tribute to the Marx Brothers, is an unrelenting barrage of slapstick, rapid-fire dialogue, and manic pacing. The plot centers on Roland Flackpfizer, played by John Turturro, a hyperactive personal injury lawyer whose ethical compass spins wildly out of control. Alongside two fellow con artists, he targets a wealthy widow who bankrolls a ballet company. Their scheme is simple: seize control of the foundation, drain it dry, and walk away rich. Naturally, the plan collapses almost immediately. Within minutes, the trio is storming elite social events, wrecking ballet rehearsals, and unintentionally turning a refined stage performance into total slapstick destruction. One unforgettable moment involves a ballerina's swan costume igniting on stage while Turturro, disguised as an usher, desperately attempts to extinguish the flames using popcorn. What sets Brain Donors apart isn't just its speed, but its total dedication to the bit. Turturro delivers dialogue at breakneck pace, as if his mouth is racing ahead of his thoughts. Every scene teeters on the edge of collapse, yet the timing never fails. The film piles on physical gags with surgical precision: falling pianos, identity mix-ups, runaway vehicles, and a courtroom climax that dissolves into complete anarchy. Behind the scenes, the movie faced an uphill battle. Shot under the working title Lame Ducks, it was hastily renamed Brain Donors just before release, then barely advertised. Paramount quietly released it, where it was immediately buried beneath juggernauts like Ghostbusters 2 and Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Yet hidden beneath that failure was a sincere effort to resurrect classic screwball comedy for a new era, and Turturro's wild performance now feels like a snapshot of comedy before irony became dominant. This leads to the next entry, a film that isn't merely funny, but historically fascinating. It represents a rare collision between two cinematic extremes: the gritty brutality of mob movies and the neon-bright absurdity of 80s comedy. It's also the only film on this list with a direct, literal connection to one of the most influential crime films ever made. Not in spirit or theme, but in origin. Both scripts were written in the same household, by the same family, at the exact same time. My Blue Heaven, 1989. Though officially released in 1990, My Blue Heaven was conceived, shot, and written during the late 80s, and it carries that era's DNA completely. Steve Martin stars as Vincent Antonelli, a flashy, loud New York mobster placed into witness protection in a quiet California suburb after betraying his criminal associates. Imagine a man dressed in sharkskin suits, heavy gold chains, and white loafers trying to disappear among PTA parents and Little League coaches. The cultural clash practically writes the comedy for itself. From his first moments in suburbia, Vincent treats the neighborhood like territory he owns. He bribes police officers, teaches retirees how to gamble, and runs an illegal betting ring out of a grocery store. He hosts outrageously loud parties, triggers lawn sprinklers, and buys a bubblegum-colored Cadillac just to feel at home. His assigned FBI supervisor, Barney Coopersmith, portrayed with perfect restraint by Rick Moranis, arrives to keep him under control, forming one of the strangest buddy pairings of the decade. Their chemistry is the film's backbone, contrasting Vincent's chaos with Barney's anxious rule-following. One hysterical scene shows Vincent instructing Barney on how to act Italian, complete with exaggerated gestures and lessons on commanding a room. Later, Vincent encounters a rival gangster in a supermarket, hides behind a cereal display, and whispers a warning about coupons. Beneath the comedy lies a surprisingly heartfelt story. Vincent begins to appreciate the simplicity of his new life, maintaining lawns, forming friendships, and even falling for a local librarian. Still, he can't escape his nature, as each small success is followed by another impulsive scheme or accidental crime. The film's backstory is equally fascinating. It draws from Nicholas Pileggi's research for Wise Guy, which later became Goodfellas. As a result, My Blue Heaven and Goodfellas were essentially developed side by side, exploring the same real-world inspiration through entirely different tones. One brutal and grounded, the other playful and absurd, together forming a strange dual portrait of mafia life. Ruthless People, 1986. Very few movies manage to make every character detestable and still remain wildly entertaining, but Ruthless People somehow accomplishes exactly that. The story begins with Sam Stone, a corrupt millionaire who plans to murder his wife, Barbara, in order to claim her fortune and run off with his mistress. Before he can act, however, someone else kidnaps her instead. That twist sends the movie spiraling into dark comedy. The abductors, Ken and Sandy, are a financially desperate couple who believe they're striking back against corporate greed by demanding ransom. Sam's reaction is anything but panicked. He celebrates, opening champagne and laughing at the idea that someone else has solved his problem. When the ransom demand arrives, he coldly tells them they'll never see a cent and hangs up. The plan soon unravels. Locked in a grimy basement, Barbara becomes a nightmare for her captors, unleashing fury, insults, and emotional warfare. Gradually, the dynamic shifts. Sandy begins to sympathize with her, Ken starts to admire her, and Barbara herself undergoes a transformation, growing more confident and independent once she realizes her husband isn't coming. By the final act, alliances have flipped, cheaters are exposed, and the story explodes into a whirlwind of greed, deception, and karmic payoff. The climax features a disastrously botched ransom exchange involving police, weapons, recordings, fake jewels, and a perfectly timed explosion. When it's over, everyone receives their just desserts except Barbara, who drives off happily, music blasting, as her husband is arrested. Behind the camera, the film marked the Zucker brothers' bold move into darker satire. The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension, 1984. Only the 1980s could produce something this unclassifiable. Buckaroo Banzai is a sci-fi comedy, martial arts spectacle, rock concert, and philosophical fever dream all at once. Peter Weller plays Buckaroo Banzai, a man who somehow balances careers as a neurosurgeon, experimental physicist, rock musician, and occasional superhero. Alongside his band, the Hong Kong Cavaliers, a group of scientist-musicians who save reality between performances, Buckaroo accidentally triggers a dimensional catastrophe by driving an experimental jet car through solid rock. This opens a gateway that allows interdimensional aliens known as electroids to escape into our world, led by the deranged Dr. Emilio Lizardo, portrayed by John Lithgow in an unforgettable, wildly unhinged performance. Lizardo believes himself a godlike figure. While the aliens see him as ridiculous, the government views Buckaroo as unstable, and the fate of existence rests on a rock star armed with futuristic tech. The film constantly feels like it's about to fly apart, yet that chaos is part of its charm. There's a desert chase involving the jet car, brain surgery performed to synth music, and a nightclub performance interrupted by an unexpectedly profound speech. Wherever you go, there you are becomes the film's oddly sincere mantra. The supporting cast is stacked with future legends, including Jeff Goldblum as a cowboy-hatted character named New Jersey, Ellen Barkin as a tragic singer, and Christopher Lloyd as an alien attempting to pass as human at the DMV. Director W.D. Richter envisioned an entire franchise, complete with sequels, comics, and even themed breakfast cereal, but the studio had no idea how to market such a strange creation. Released with little fanfare and an incomprehensible poster, the film struggled initially. Today, it stands as a perfect encapsulation of 80s creativity. Messy, fearless, and unforgettable. If you enjoyed the journey, like, share, and subscribe to Vintverse for more lost films, strange histories, and cinematic mayhem from decades past, because here nostalgia never fades.